invitation. There he is. Wow.
Sure.
He went and got dressed especially for us. So you look a lot better than you did an hour ago.
I did. It was a case of having to. I actually went out in the back lawn there for a little while. I'd taken, we're babysitting a dog, so I'd taken the dog for a walk and all sorts of things.
Oh, that's
trying to get this volume going a little bit better.
Is it a good dog?
Yes, it's actually a Cavapoo. It's the same size as our cat. They won't integrate, but we're trying, yeah.
So if I'm a bit boring, you can look out for the whales at the back there that jump in this time of the year, apparently.
Where the hell are you?
I'm on Big Island.
Currently. Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, no, it's nice out there. Did you go all the way up to the mountain?
No, usually don't leave the resort, to be honest. We play golf at Kukio and Nanea, and then it's hard to go anywhere else. So it's a good opportunity for me. I don't always get a chance to play, a few days in a row and stuff like that. So
there's a good Italian restaurant. I remember doing the Champions Tour event there at Hawalalai, and I think there's a Marriott. You come out of the golf course and keep going left.
Yep.
And there's like this little either Italian or Mexican restaurant. It's been a while since I've been. It's actually really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff here. Yeah, we got I'm leaving, but the tournament is next week. So a bunch of the guys are coming. I've been seeing Halo out here grinding.
No, he's never stopped. He's amazing. He's one of my idols. VJ's got a place on the Big Island too.
That's right. He comes over here, but he's on the other side. He's at Hilo.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a shame. But I would have gone to the Sony, which I didn't. I would have interviewed VJ. He would have been fascinating. People get a really a misinterpretation of what to certain people. I mean, he's a great guy.
He is.
If he recognizes that you're somebody that really is interested and curious and potentially even struggling, he really takes people under his wing and helps a lot.
I remember when Duffner won the PGA Championship, and he was leading after 3 rounds, and I was doing the live from, and the set was just over the chipping green there at Oak Hill, and I looked down and I saw VJ. So we had like a commercial break. Oh, sorry, we're getting ready for the show. So I went down. I said, "VJ, can I tell a story?" And he goes, "No." I said, "Come on, VJ." I said, because a lot of people don't realize, to your point, how many players he's helped, and Duffner was one of them. That he taught him, almost how to practice. Very misinterpreted, but a lot of people haven't gone to Fiji either. They don't know the constitution there. In other words, he's part Fijian, part Indian, so therefore they can never ever rule the country. I mean, there's a lot of things in the background, and I think once you understand the background, you start to understand the man. And I've known him for a teammate at President's Cup. I've known him since he was 20, so
amazing.
Long time, yeah.
Did you play the Asian Tour at all?
Yeah, I did a little bit. I was there actually the week Payne and Tracy Stewart first met up because Mike Ferguson. So, yeah, I mean, it was I turned pro when I was 19, so you had to. You went to Australia and then, you lost your money and you came back to New Zealand, played pro-ams and all that, went back to Australia, you win a little bit of money, then you go to Asia.
Right.
First time you'd lose money, so you'd go back and you'd go back to Australia, maybe go home, maybe make a little more, then you go to Asia, maybe make some money, then you go to Europe. That was the way everybody did it in those days. It was fun, yeah.
It's it's such a good grounding for people. I always say, for young golfers going over there, and like you've said, it's understanding context and different cultures. But that's what I was going to say. I was going to kind of introduce you and say, we've had some chats around tournaments and what have you, and obviously watching on TV. Everyone I've interviewed so far, and everyone probably I will interview, has a curious mind around golf, and you're one of the most curious, and which is great considering the position you're in. So, we as instructors almost feel like you're the person that best represents us when you're speaking on TV. So,
I appreciate that, but it's also, I think, it's weird with not to go down the political rant, right? But news used to be non-profit, right? News was never for profit. So it doesn't matter what country. I grew up in New Zealand. You grew up obviously in the UK. But, when you turn on the news, that was it. That was like, hey, that's what happened in the day. And then when all of a sudden they realized, like, I think it was Desert Storm, and it was CNN. My daughter works for them. And, when all of a sudden we saw a war that was actually covered right there and then, and the ratings went up and people realized they could start to make money out of news. I think that's when it all started. And golf, professional golf's no different. I still think the game's every bit as pure as what it is now. You know, obviously you got to put the regulations to a side. Do I like what they've done with some of the rules? No, I haven't. I think COR, they made a huge mistake. You know, I know everybody looks at the ball, but terrible analogy. You build the bullet after you build the gun. Everyone's just looking at the ball, right? So,
it's a relationship, isn't it, as well? The way they've kind of, you know, built one another to match.
Yeah, and I think, so for me, when I started doing TV, you know, I just thought it was part of golf. And then I realized it wasn't. You know, I was naive. It was never a goal. And I realized that I needed to be curious, because a lot of what was being said was just plain marketing.
Yeah.
And I remember going back, you know, I've been doing it now since 2003, to end of 2002, so 17 years. And initially, it's like I knew how I played golf, but my job wasn't to talk about how I played golf. Yeah, I could tell the odd story, but really it was about whoever was on the screen. And then you realize, well, how do they play golf? And I mightn't like their instructor, but I'm like, well, what is it that their instructor did that made them better? And, you know, maybe if I had that opportunity, would that have helped me? And if it wouldn't have helped me, then why wouldn't it have helped me? But then still, maybe it could have helped somebody else. And then, yeah, then it's Pandora's box, actually, which is fun.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is Robbie Lelbell just joined us. So he's our club's version of Matt Wolf, which brings me to the point is, you know, the technology coming into golf. You know, again, you've done a great job of reaching out and trying your best to really understand, you know, what's going on in the technology of golf. Has probably, it's an interesting thing. There's probably a potential for the more unique swings to reemerge, right? Like a Matt Wolf and guys like that, in terms of, you know, the outcome becomes the objective again in terms of TrackMan and things like that. So it's a really interesting time that, you know, potentially, you know, look at like a Victor Hovland or you know, even Bryson, very much going back to somewhat result oriented versus video oriented, which was, you know, the definition of your age.
Yeah, but that's when you talk about curiosity. You have to go back. I remember Riviera last year when you and I were talking about your book, which you still owe me a copy when it comes out. And
1 month-ish.
1 month-ish, yeah, I'll hold you to that. Yeah. But
you know, I really appreciate you busting my balls every single time you see me about that. By the way, it helps.
Hey, I've got to. It's the only way it's going to get done. But the conversation we had on the back of the range, we were watching Jordan at the time, you know, about matchups. And I don't want to steal your words, because you know, I could spend all day trying to just, you know, what you did so succinctly with me. And I think I told you the Pete Cowan story with Matthew Fitzpatrick about, you know, the butterfly grip that he had. And I'm like, hey, Pete, when are you going to change the grip? He said, look at the ball. And so I sort of led with that. And then you started going through player after player. Aaron Baddeley was also there. And I found that amazing, because that was not, to your point, the era that I grew up in. We were in the era that we were supposedly cleaning up all the individual things that probably that might not have worked for you or me or whatever. So in other words, we thought textbook was the way out. And also too, remember, and you coming from the UK, the John Jacobs thing. And I remember Dennis Pugh, who I worked with, probably played my best golf under him. And he was one of the first guys in the UK to disagree with John Jacobs, and that did not go down well. You know, everything was path orientated. One guy, I think, just went on the putting green from about 3 feet, had the putter face closed, and says, so if my pass goes straight, it goes in, right? And they go, well, no, not for that. You know, not for that. What about a chip? No, not for that. Not for that. So, well, which one is it? And then, you know, when you start to unravel it, and we didn't have the TrackMans, the flight scopes, you know, the GC quads of today. So that unraveling process was really weird, but I think it was necessary. It was almost cathartic. And then we are where we are now, which was we've gotten the full circle. And now you can pretty much play how you want. And now, like, that's why I embrace what you're doing, which is matchups.
Right.
And, you know, the Miller Barbers of the world, George Burns, you know, I mean, there's so many players. Even Nicklaus, when Nicklaus came out, it wasn't going to last, remember?
Well, the interesting thing about Nicklaus, even Hogan, you know, almost every swing theory that has
Excuse me. I'm going to hopefully, yeah. The easiest way, sorry, I apologize, whoever that
is. You know, the interesting thing about, you know, Jack Nicklaus and Hogan is another one. Obviously, they get talked about as, you know, two of the best players of all time. Is you can choose different swings from different generations from them to prove your point. right? So I think, you know, Jack had his best swing when he came out, and, you know, in my opinion, you know, migrated to some different stuff. Even in his, I think his second book, he talked about how he was changing, you know, his weight shift and the way he was using his right arm. But early on, of course, he became, you know, they talk a lot about his flying elbow, which in my opinion for him was a perfect matchup. And then you have, you know, Hogan, whose trail arm, you know, really migrated from being much more under to more neutral. So it is interesting because, you know, those two are always used, and you literally can choose, you know, a decade where they swung differently. But obviously they're still great players, but they had periods in their career where they, you know, they hit at their best. So that's an interesting piece.
Yeah, and that's just the swing too, because I think that's the other thing that we, when, you know, many of some of the many chats we've had on the range, you know, if we just look at the car, right? You know, I like Formula One. I know, you know, you watched it as well. It's fine to have a car that goes fast, but can you drive it, or does it suit that driver? So yeah, are you know, Jack Nicklaus has shorter arms too. That's the other thing, and the body type's different. You know, Hogan barely 5'10". You know, I've heard different. I never saw him hit a ball, to be honest. But you know, and then you had Nick Faldo, who's like 6'4", nearly 6'5", trying to copy Ben Hogan through his probably most productive years. So that's what I go back to matchups, and also the type of player. If you're a very conservative player, how can you play like a Bryson DeChambeau, for example? And that's where Bryson gets a lot of, you know, I've had a lot of chats going back to when Bryson first turned pro, and he was trying to help me with some of my health issues over the years. He's like, no, I've got a guy that can help and all this, and what do you do? And he's actually a pretty, you know, forthcoming guy. Now, some of the stuff he does, to be fair, is marketing. He knows that. He's a smart enough guy. But he was criticized with the golfing machine attachment and all this. And now, even the one-length club, and I was like curious, you know, golf is such a difficult game to learn. And you think, well, one of the reasons why, you know, you learn tennis, you get one tennis racket. You learn baseball, softball, it's one bat, one ball, right? I mean, we're going to give you 14 clubs, and we're going to tell you got to hit some high and long and short and all that. I mean, no wonder it's so hard. And there's the Bobby Jones philosophy. Well, what about if we make all the irons one length? And then you can argue with his US Open win, you know, like playing shots out of the rough, you normally default to the most loft, right? Like a wedge. Well, if his wedge is a 6-iron length, he's actually got the perfect club to hit out a long rough to go the furthest distance. I mean, it's just little things that, you know, the more you look at it, you go, man, this is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, he's piecing together a very complex puzzle in a very interesting way. You know, he's another player that, you know, you can take him both ways, right? But I was actually spent some time with him at the Sony Open here a few years ago, and he's unbelievable when he plays with the Pro-Am people. You know, so he goes out, he looks for their ball, he remembers their swing on the, you know, 4 holes ago. You know, he remembers their name. You know, he's you know, he's really paying attention, which is a really cool thing. So I think, you know, people have different sides to them. Obviously, it's a very competitive arena that these players are playing in. So sometimes, you know, it doesn't always come across as being, you know, PR friendly. But given the right context, there's some interesting guys out there.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Vijay Singh. If you spoke to a Vijay Singh, fellow Pro-Am player, they all rave about him. Because he does the same thing, takes the time, and they all go on with this misconception, I've been drawn with Vijay Singh. And then at the end of the day, like, wow, he gave me this, he told me this, he talked about two-handed chipping, you know, the underhanded, you know, reverse grip and all this, and he's like, he did this, and he's talking about how hard he hit it, and he was great. And they're almost shocked. So it shows you, going back to the news thing, it's easier just to write him off and say he's a bad guy, right? But the truth is far from it. And then also when you know, he's been a teammate of mine, President's Cups, and also when I was an assistant captain. So, you know, I've seen all the different sides to a VJ, and I happen to like him, you know, like, and I'm not trying to defend him. I'm just saying, have you seen that part of him? Have you seen that part of him? And to be honest, since I started doing TV for you know, as many years as I have, he's the one guy that I've known that treats me the same way as when I was inside the ropes. The one guy,
really interesting point.
Yeah, so to me, that's a big compliment, yeah.
So the guys are a little bit apprehensive to give away the good stuff when you're around now?
Oh, of course, yeah, I would be. I mean, gamekeeper turn you know, poacher, basically. That's what it is. Yeah, so, yeah, I would have been the same. Yeah, so I don't hold that against him, but, yeah, he's like, hey, whatever, you know, it's the same guy, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Interestingly, I did test you, and, you know, you're basically somebody that, from a swing standpoint, you know, hopefully people will go back and take a look at your swing because it was very elegant. But you actually match up as being very much in the middle, right? So you're a side on, what we call center post. So the type of swings that you gravitated towards. So you worked with Ledbetter, you worked with Mac. Did you work with Mac?
No, actually, I met Mac in, I was going to say 1982 when I first got to Europe, tried there. Yeah, and I played with him at Bingley St. Ives, English Open, I think it was. No, Lawrence Batley. And I remember I was traveling with Mike Clayton, who's now an extremely good rider and course designer in Australia. And we were going to go to Holland, I think it was the following week. And I just enjoyed playing with Mac. He'd finished third, I think, in the British PGA with like 9 clubs. Oddly enough, all his clubs were Hogan specs. And I'd never heard of the golfing machine, from a book point of view, but I'd heard the phrase before because I played in the Eisenhower in 1978, and the leading amateur that year was Bobby Clampett. And I remember going out to watch. He was drawn with #1 amateur in the world, who was a Canadian player. His name escaped, Gary Cowan. And Pacific Harbour was a Robert Trent Jones golf course, internal out of bounds and all that. And there's Gary Cowan hitting 1-irons, and Bobby Clampett's giving it the little, setting the right elbow there, and he's just ripping it with a driver. I'd never seen anyone play that way. We were the same age. We were the 2 youngest in the field at 18. So I'd heard the name Golf Machine, but never read it, never picked up the book. So there I'm playing with Mac, and Mac says, do you want to play a practice round next week in Holland? So we did, and I invited Mike along. And we got to this par 3, and, stood up. We're hitting like a 6-iron or whatever it is. And Mac hits 7, comes up on the front. And I just go, hey, you needed 6. And he goes, no, I got to spin my hips quicker. So he just goes, drops another ball down, whack, ball goes 10 yards further. I said, yeah, but you had to hammer it. So he gets another one, whacks another 7 on. This one goes 10 yards further. I'm like, fair enough. So then he gets one more and he emails the green. Now, that's impressive when you're really young, but obviously under the heat, it's not really going to work. Yeah. But I was so enamored. Sam Snead and Tommy Bolt were also in the field. I watched Sam Snead hit range balls off mud basically that week. And he had to be in his 60s or whatever. And talk about elegant. That was so wonderful to see. But Mike and I got a lift back with Mac and his wife, Fominko. And it started to rain outside the hotel, and there was a little railing, it was probably about 2.5, 3 feet high. So he started to explain the plane. So there's Sam Snead and Tommy Bolt probably about 10 feet away drinking whiskey, and Mac with these 2 young idiots from Australasia getting drenched, and Mac explaining like the plane lines. And I was so enamored. Anyway, it was really nice. He gave me a copy of the book, and he gave me 65 psych-style pages, which were questions that actually helped you get through the book. And I made a mistake once. I lent them to Peter Croker, who basically plagiarized it, and I've never ever had the pages back again. I never told Mac that either. But I went away, but I only lasted about 6 weeks, I guess, in Europe, ran out of money. But I remember going back to New Zealand, and I read that book like a textbook. And my first start was in Australia, and I was 21 years old, I think, or 22. And I played in the New South Wales PGA. And I remember making a cut on the nose, then breaking the course record on Saturday, and then doing the same thing on Sunday to win my first sort of big professional tournament, the New South Wales PGA. But I was convinced the book was right. And I'm not saying it is now, but it at least allowed me to go down an area of looking into the golf swing. And then when I went to Europe, I hooked up with Dennis Pugh. So you talk about center axis. So Dennis was, three P's really, was posture, positioning, and playing. So I would swing around my right hip and on the way back and swing around my left hip. So I was very, very centered. And that was the goal. And a lot of the drills there too were anti-Fred Couples drills. Fred's a flipper, VJ's a flipper as well. And it was very much trying to keep, like I said, Dennis disagreed with John Jacobs. So it was very much club face control. So the positioning was making sure the club face was in a position, also the way in which you released it on the way down. And then obviously lack of rotation of the club face through the hitting area. So that's very much what I worked on. Oh,
interesting. I was going to say, so the interesting thing about golfing machine, I mean, I'm not an expert, but Mike, Mike Adams, who I'm writing the book with, is, his father was one of the early people. It gave a lot of options, I think, and what we're doing, as you see with the testing, is more direction in terms of which specific anatomical parts are relevant to you, and so specifically, when you talk about face rotation, it's an interesting subject You know, some of the smartest people in golf will argue that less rotation is better. But we just haven't seen it. You know, we've done a bunch of testing, actually, you know, measuring it, and you know, depending on the type of grip. So you take someone like a Rory, for example, has a little bit, you know, weaker trail hand grip, and you get somebody who, you know, obviously Lee Trevino is the most extreme, or Dustin Johnson. It's the stronger grips. You know, basically the way we measured the grip and what we talk about in the, you know, ultimate golf lesson is a grip is actually really three pieces. It's your intention to hit the ball at the target. It's the, you know, the face and the hand relationship, right? So basically, if somebody has a stronger grip, they're effectively have a closed club face, and so as a consequence of them trying to hit the ball at the target, they have a very low rate of closure, and vice
Correct.
versa. So, you know, we talked about so VJ, for example, you know, VJ tests out as having a very weak, you know, trail arm position, which, you know, so that arm gets kind of up and back behind him more. And, you know, but effectively his face is open to his hand. So he needs a high rate of opening, a rate of closure, and an earlier rate of closure. So that timing is something that we've kind of dialed in. So hopefully, you know, once you get the book, you can see what we've done. We also got our winter workshop coming up. So, yeah, love to have you take a look at that too. But it kind of defines some of the things that were, you know, potentially under the hood.
But it's interesting you use the phrase under the hood, because, you know, I got a generator put in last year. You know, I live in Florida, and I'm trying to make an analogy with a golf swing where, you know, it's all right, it's all ready to go, and you know, you have to wait for the gas company to, you know, get your permit and all that. And anyway, it was sort of up and running, but the electrician says, you know, I don't know about this. Can you make sure it's got the right jet? Because I have LPG, not natural gas.
Right.
And it was working fine, but it was making, you know, a little bit of a knock. And then lo and behold, you know, I get the gas company in and the Generac people, and yeah, it had the jet for natural gas.
Mm-hmm.
So it can still work, but it's not as efficient and it's not as good.
Perfect
Yeah.
analogy
Yeah.
for these tour players, because you know that you guys are really good, right? And you know, especially interesting, like the evolution of a week on tour is, you know, you guys are so good that, you know, your attention to, you know, paying attention to hit the golf shot at the target is something which everyone takes for granted on tour. But, you know, you actually have to teach bad golfers to do that, you know, because they think the swing exists in a vacuum. But, you know, so you can almost teach anything on Monday or Tuesday, you know, as the clock ticks towards Thursday morning, only the good stuff stays or should stay, or
I think that's because you get into player mode, and that's where, like, you know, when you it's so multifaceted. It was purely just a hitting exhibition, right? In other words, if you were marked on what you did on the range, and there was proper targets. So golf was not about making a score. It was not about performing in front of people. It was just simply a hitting exercise. Yeah, I think you could do things like that and go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And you're right. I think when people are given a scorecard and a pencil on Thursday, the tendency is, on the first tee, well, you know, you stand up and you're either going to go, okay, I'm going to go with this, or just as you're about to take your last waggle, it goes, this doesn't feel so good, because you're in competitive mode and you're like, well, I don't like that bunker on the left, or, you know, what, I don't know if I can carry that. And now it's the ifs and buts and all that. And that's almost the same as leading a tournament, where you have to go into automatic mode. You know, you're nervous, you're tight and all that. And then you go, I'm going to bang it. And you just go and you rip it. And a bit like Dustin Johnson when he won at Oakmont there. I mean, his best shots were when he was told he had the penalty.
Yeah.
Playing with Lee Westwood on the par 5 and hit it so far down there. And it's such a narrow fairway. Right. And it's tee shot on 18. And they're the two shots really where you don't think you have to rely on what you have. But coaching the player to get that's that two-folded thing. Because if it's competitive mode, if he's struggling for form, or, you know, he's right on the cusp of 125 and he might lose his card and all that, that's going to compete with even the best information that you're giving him over here.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the ecosystem of golf. Actually, what I was going to ask you is, obviously swing is part of it that we obviously talk about. It's very visual. It's hard to see, you know, it's easy for us to measure all the metrics, especially these days, you know, with the launch monitor, the force plate, motion capture, you know, but, you know, the inside is not seen, right? So it's more mystical, right? And so, you know, humans love a bit of mysticism, is, you know, so we start to give our own interpretation to what's going on. He's tough, you know, he's not, you know, this and that. So it's so interesting. How did you manage kind of over the evolution of your career, if you look back, were there kind of decisive moments where you learned a lesson and just never went back, or is it continually kind of evolving and changing? As I said something yesterday, it was if only once I could play my normal game, So how did that go?
Yeah, I think there's definitive times in your career where you change lanes. I started off playing golf at 13. I had hit golf balls before on a beach, but I'd played other sports. And I always tell people, that if they've got a kid around 8 or 9, I always think that's a hard age. I said either get them in there really early or when they're strong enough to swing properly.
Right.
It's helped a little bit by now because of the kids' clubs, but before, you got an adults club. So it was really hard to swing. So I played tennis. I played rugby league. I'd like the school record for 800 meters. So I had a lot of other, things that I did before I got into golf. So it allowed me to get into golf and get in there and develop very, very quickly because of hand-eye coordination that I'd learned in other sports.
Right.
From a psychological point of view, too, when I was 15, 16, my parents were going through a divorce. So when you think about golf being a sole or a loner game, it was perfect. So mentally, it was the right time. And I remember winning the New Zealand Amateur on my 18th birthday. So that was a case of like the natural part of my career where you were just playing golf. That was all it was. And then I just mentioned like the Imperial moment with Mac. And so that was the most technical I think I ever was in my career. And it actually worked in a tournament straight away. Oddly enough, once, in golf, you always want to share, your successes. I mean, we're a really weird bunch. You would think if you found the Holy Grail, you wouldn't tell anyone, right? In other words, I just found $1 million here. I'm not going to tell anyone where it is. But we go, it's here. I've actually found it. I found it. You should have a look at it.
That's right.
So you tell people, hey, look, I've just changed my grip. I'm doing this or this. I got this great move here. I count or whatever. And then people start to disprove it because it's not what they do. And then you play poorly and you go, maybe they're right. And then you basically break yourself down. And then I had to, I went through those sort of ups and downs. And to be honest, then it was when I was, I was a better player. I was getting older and that. And when I hooked up with Dennis Pugh, because he explaining why the face was so important. And then I put a little bit of the golfing stuff in the background because that's why I like what you're doing, because I'm not trying to tout the book, but I like the fact that it catered for so many different styles of play. And so to me, I hate it when people go one size fits all. So when you and I like talking about matchups, to me, it was like music to my ear because, hey, you can go left eye dominant, right eye dominant. They're all different things. Henrik Stenson lives in the same place. He's a left-hander that plays golf, right-hander, same as Johnny Miller. There's Mickelson's the opposite.
Mickelson, right.
Yeah, so you get a lot of players like that, or which eye and that's going to affect who you are and how you play. So for me, being able to ask Dennis a question, and I did what everybody else did. I try to hit down to make it go up.
Right.
We were told we still say that on TV every now and again. That's the worst thing in the world.
Hit down to get them to spin.
Yeah, hit down to make it go up. It'll spin more. I'm like, are you? Honestly, I did that the first. I remember Joseph Mayo arguing with him and that. I mean, he's great. He also explained to me, like the shut club face, because I was never told why that would work. And so Dennis explained to me why the club face was so important. And I was also playing in an area where control was the big thing. We were transitioning, the shafts were the most important thing, steel shaft, I had rifle shafts. So we were all going to frequency match. So it was club face. The game was still cut and hook and all this and hit it low, ball spun. You can go into that. Each era has to use what they want. I mean, that's one of my criticisms now of some of the players complaining about the ball. Hey, don't get me wrong. A lot of what they said is right. Why didn't they say it when they were playing their best?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Because number one, they're getting paid like the guys are today. And number two, they were using the best product they could. Gary Player, for example, was trying fiberglass shafts in the 60s. So as golfers, we do also tend to be a little hypocritical, but to try and in an effort to get back and answer your question, so I think Dennis explaining the club face and then learning to compete again. So once you have something to trust, then you start to go back to your competitive skills. And then I probably came to America too late, and it was too late because, came in was 36. I got diagnosed with inflammatory polyarthritis when I was, 37, tried to play there for a little while. Mate, that's the way it goes.
It's an interesting time that you came. I mean, looking at your record, mid-90s, you were front and center to see the young Tiger come out. And what was your last year on tour?
Last year on tour was 2002.
So you saw, front and center what the changing of the guard almost. I mean, you got you and Faldo and Montgomery kind of dropping out around that time, and Tiger coming in, reinventing the game. You're obviously seeing Bryson try and change the way things are looking now. It's, to your point, I think it's also a mindset, right? It's not just hit it further. It has to match up to who you are. Tiger, interestingly, was not that guy, right? I mean, he's very careful with his strategy, so it's interesting.
Yeah, he was. I remember getting along fine with him when I first turned pro. It was. It's a case of what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? Was the time right for him, or was he right for the time?
Right.
To be honest, I don't know the right answer for that. But I remember before he won the Masters in '97, there was a big event in I'm going to say Thailand. Norman was there, Faldo was there, Curtis Strange was there. I remember being there. I tagged on with the other guys from IMG and Tiger Woods. So it was before he'd won the Masters, and they're all there to watch him. That was the amazing thing. So it was almost, they'd heard a rumor, but people even believed in the rumor.
Yeah.
And it was their chance to see them up close and personal. And they, like, a lot of people wanted it to happen. And one of the things that I've always been impressed with him is how he handled the moment. They always say the calm is in the center of the storm. And I don't know whether it comes from his dad, his mom, him, or whatever. You can credit 1,000 people, but he still had to live it. And when everything was at its craziest, he was calm.
Yeah.
And that I found unbelievable. I'd play with him a bunch of times when it was a frenzy, and he would just, it didn't really matter what he did on the previous hole, the previous shot, or whatever. And I remember we played at Pebble Beach one year. It was the last round. And I don't think, I finished 10th, so we weren't that far off the lead. But I don't think it was a winning situation. But he wasn't playing that good that day. And I remember we had 5 holes to go, and we overheard he was talking to his caddy, and he goes, "Let's birdie the last 5 holes." And I'm like, at his standards, he hadn't played that good. He hadn't had a, cow in the butt with a banjo basically all day long, and which was unusual because every other day I played with him, he played phenomenal. And but his presence of mind was always push forward, push forward, push forward. Now, he didn't birdie the last 5 holes. That'd be a great story. But I'd also played with him at the Open Championship in 1996, where he'd shot 64 in the, I'm going to say the 3rd round. And it was brilliant. We'd both played okay for about the first 12 or 13 holes, a couple under par. But it's not that he found a gear, but he found a way to get a score and did hit some shots that you wouldn't consider. The 16th hole, and if it gets a par 5, you play it short of the burn there. And we're all laying up with, 3-wood, 2-iron or whatever, and you couldn't reach because it was into the breeze. He had a Cobra driver in those days, and he'd hit his tee shot on a little bit of a downslope and would have had 270, 280 into the breeze. I know there's a bit of run in that, but it's the way it's bunkered. He was mucking around, and I'm like, God, what is he doing? Just whack it down there. It's a layup, knock it on the green. And all of a sudden, he pulls out this Cobra driver, and I'm like, well, I got, we'll watch. Yeah, I mean, this is going to be embarrassing, basically. I mean, he's really, I don't know what he's trying to do. I don't. And he hit this sort of low, I mean, he nailed it, don't get me wrong, but a low swirling cut, and it avoided the bunkers the way they're staggered and all that, and got it on the front of the green. I'm like, well, there's a big risk to get it 50, 60 feet away. Anyway, he makes it for 3, and then the 17th hole's a par 3. It's like a 3-iron because it was still into the breeze, true and you playing all the way back into it, and pulls it left. So he's in dog tucker down there, and he's mucking around and all that, taking a little bit more time. Bang, bumps it up the hill, and he holes it. And then 18, he hit a perfect drive, but blocked his second shot. Not like I've forgotten it, right? And plugged it. Had to go out sideways. He makes it from 15 feet. Had to play the bunker shot sideways, 15, 20 feet. It added up to 64, and I'm like, when you always hear the stories, they got lucky and all that. And I'm like, and then when I replayed my round and his round in my mind, is that he just kept looking forward. He was always looking for ways out of the predicament. So for him, the second shot with the driver was a predicament. And right there and then, he was chasing the lead. He wasn't just trying to shoot a good score. Like, he was trying to get himself back in the tournament. Actually, he did. And I remember because I actually I said that in a speech at his event, which used to be at Thousand Oaks. And it was the year that Jim Furyk had just won the Player of the Year, winning the FedEx Cup the year before. And Furyk was in the table in front, and Jim got up and he goes, I was listening to the story. And I'm like, because I played in that event, And Jim actually played with him the very next day, and he shot like 78 or 77. So he said, my story's totally different to yours. But yeah, no, he was amazing. And the shots he had, Ernie Els gave him the best. You know, Ernie in those days was the guy. Curtis Strange said, "This is where golf's going." You know, 6'4", 6'5", wonderful rhythm. You can't really build a golf course that this guy's not going to overpower. Got a phenomenal touch.
Good, and it was Hazeltine.
Oh yeah, but all the cliches, all the cliches known to man, yeah. But the ninth hole, the par 4, and Ernie was playing with him, and Tiger had hit it. I don't know if he was standing out of the bunker or on the lip of the bunker. It was like he had 3 iron for him, so that's 230, something like that. And it's like, what's he doing, sort of thing. And he hit a draw off a side hill lie into the breeze, and I hit it to about 15 feet. And for Els to say it's the greatest shot he's ever seen, it probably is the greatest shot he's ever seen. So, yeah.
I got one comment to say. You know, what's amazing for me with tour players, I mean, obviously you have to be able to get up every day and give it your best shot, but it's almost like you could look at it from different levels. So shot to shot, reinventing the context to make it exciting and positive. You know, you've just come off 3, you know, double bogey, triple bogey, bogey, whatever. The next hole, you know, is suddenly the most important hole, and you just got to, you know, clean up your system and keep going. Then you've had a bad round, you've got to get up the next day and create a good round. And the players that I've been around, it always amazes me that, you know, the next day it's like, you know, there was a storm and now it's bright blue sky. And nothing ever happened, right? And so it's just that ability to kind of reinvent your present reality is a great skill that I've seen, and it's very necessary for people, you know, like yourself, who play at the highest level.
Yeah, I think golfers in between the ropes are often pessimistic. They appear that way, you know, the head's down. You look at it. I mean, a guy's shooting 62, and he looks like somebody just stole his car and his house. You know, his head's down and all that, because the round's not finished. You know, it's like, I got to play another hole. I got to play another hole. And yet you wake up, as I remember when I did, is with this amazing wave of optimism. Today's the day.
Yeah, that's right.
And you don't play like that. And you're dead right. You could, you know, you just shot, you know, a horrible round the day before, and all of a sudden it's like, I think I got it. You know, that's where you hear the stories. You know, I heard it the other day in the documentary. You're pulling over on the side of the road. Everybody did that. You know, where you go, oh, what about if I do this? Or you're angry just before you go to bed. And in those days, you know, you had your club sitting in the hotel room as well. And you'd grab a club, and you'd go, you look at and all of a sudden, maybe it's a fear like, oh, my middle 2 fingers of my right hand. That's what I forgot to do. I've been gripping it too much with my thumb. That's what I'm going to do tomorrow. And you sleep late, and you wake out of bed, and you're like, oh, here we go. But when you're playing the round, because you're doing all those calculations, you're not getting to enjoy it as much, because it's like, hey, you know, you're talking to your caddy, what's it to that trap? Where's the breeze? You know, and that's why rangefinders, when people go, hey, I did a lot of stuff with Bushnell there for a while, but at the highest level, they're not going to work, because that's not how pros play golf.
That's right.
They don't go 175. They go, what's the carry on the trap? Where's that ridge? How far is the flag over the ridge? Okay. And they're always thinking, oh, that's in between clubs. What about the ridge behind the flag? Oh, that doesn't work. What have I got on the left side? And you're trying to calculate, okay, I'm going to hit the hard 7 then. But all of a sudden, the same number with the ridge different, now it's a soft 6.
Bads is the best I've heard of that. You can imagine this answer from his mouth. He goes, I said, I was kind of investigating how people hit in between clubs. I said, well, how do you hit, you know, whatever. Let's say his 8 iron goes 150, his 9 iron goes, 8 iron goes like 165, whatever, his 9 iron goes 150. So, well, how do you hit it 158? He goes, I think 158. And I have another example, like I'll get a yardage when I play sometimes, you know, uphill hole, you can't exactly see where the pin is, even though you've got the metrics. You think it's on the front, you get the yardage for the front, you do the measurements, you hit it exactly where you thought the pin was, and it's actually, you know, 15 yards past. So even though you had the number for the flag, your perception of the situation actually had a bigger influence. So it's kind of interesting. There is still, you know, obviously such a huge human piece to it.
Oh, there is. It's interesting you talk about Aaron Baddeley, because I remember when the guy that worked for me for a long period of time, Ant-Man, Anthony Knight, he was caddying for Aaron Baddeley, and it was the President's Cup 2000, was at Royal Melbourne anyway, and the 2 young guys on the team were Jason Day and Aaron Baddeley, even though Aaron, you know, as we know, was prolific as a teenager. So Ant-Man was caddying for Aaron Badley, and his coach, Stephen Bann, was there, and Jason Day. And we decided, because they had so much energy, we were going to pair them together.
Mm-hmm.
So I was watching them on the range, and, there's a flag, they're aiming at a flag or a stick down there, and Aaron was hitting 8-irons, and Stephen Bann, he was there. But these 8-irons, they were like 10 yards short, 30 yards over. They're the same club. And Jason was doing the same thing. Everything was a high hook, just thrashing it. So I said to Ant-Man, I said, how do you club for him? He says, I can't. So to your point, but I remember saying to Stephen at that time, I said, because you see these young guys and the sound of the ball is just so impressive. But to quote it like a Nick Faldoism, do they have a 156 shot? Now, they don't always have to have it, but it's always easy to look at their weakness because they have all the other departments. They hit it so far, they're touched, they're fearless. But every now and again, you see them in the middle of the field where they have a stock yardage and they email the green. But they're as impressive as hell.
Yeah, that's interesting. Again, I noticed it in my game is the hardest shot is probably a 165 7-iron to the middle of the green. It's too many options. You put three in the way, a bit of a breeze, hold it up, drive it in, whatever it is. It kind of clarifies the outcome a little bit better in your brain.
But you should at least have a brick wall yardage. You know what I mean?
Right.
The club should never go past a certain distance. Because that way, I remember when Calcavecchia won the Open Championship, and, everybody's talking about square grooves, and I'm not really using that as the point, but he hit in the right rough, and the flag was at the back. There's no out of bounds just over the back there. And he just grabbed a 7-iron and whacked it out of the rough. Now, people complained about, the square grooves in the rough, but they have almost the same grooves today. And people are still hitting these incredible yardages. And a lot of that is the ball, the lack of spin in that, but still the goal. And that's one thing that Tiger Woods had. Tiger Woods could hit it to a flag right at the back of the green, and the ball would not go a yard further. And that is a talent, and that's the difference. That's something that Rory doesn't quite have. Dustin Johnson's getting very good at. That's a big difference.
Well, it's one of those things, isn't it? He really pays attention to his numbers every single day. And, it's so much so that it's not conscious to him anymore, but he's seeing a number for every single thing that he does, which is really cool. The way we, teach grip and what have you. So people were, usually like a Rory, for example, but let's take a Hogan or somebody with a weaker trail hand grip, basically delivers a little bit more loft, so they'll tend to spin it. I was working with one player and Harrington came over, and so I didn't realize you were working with him. I love his game because he can spin it. So the best players really realize that, you can potentially win Pebble Beach or whatever it is, soft greens, but at the highest level, the most important moment, being able to, spin the ball is terrifically important. So someone like Calc, I would argue that he probably had, one of the highest spinning kind of swings anyway. And so, it just needed a certain context where someone looked at it and says, wow, that's not fair, he got all that spin. Usually in the Open, obviously, there's probably some reward for having a relatively low spinning ball, but obviously, as much as you have to hit it low on a links course, you have to also hit it high sometimes and get some spin. So that's really just matching his style to the circumstances, I guess.
Yeah, very much so. But like I said, I think it's key. Obviously, you want to hit the driver as far as you can, but it's key with just about every other club in the bag that there's a point of no further. And then I think it's easier to club, it's easier to play golf if you know. And then you can work the other side too. Chances are if the ball's not going to go further than a certain distance with a club, then you are going to be a little more consistent in your strike. And then you can start working on your carry yardages as well. Because if the ball's not going to go further than a number, chances are you've got a good flight as well. So you get the front piece of it.
The reason I started putting these interviews together is we got an education event coming up in February for coaches. And, really I'm just asking everybody if you could give some coaches some advice, from the perspective of your, incredible career and great mind and curiosity about golf. How would you improve golf coaching generally? And specifically, what do you see as a difference between the guys that have been up there for a long time versus the other people that maybe haven't?
Well, it's actually a rather simple question and a complicated answer, because the first thing I would say is don't listen to people like me in my position. Because no, and to be truthful, we some guys are, after you get to know them, they understand that sometimes you've got to critique players leading the tournament. Paul Hicks in the water, and then there's a magic, they push a button, there's a rewind, and then obviously there's got to be a critique. Critique
Right.
doesn't always have to be negative either. So people are sensitive. I am as a player, I am as an announcer. So I think the hardest thing that I've found is that coaches, because you guys are like doctors, that you're always looking for a better way to cure the patient.
Right.
And so therefore it's a much more of a holistic approach. So you don't need the cookie cutters coming in, you're spending too much money on research, is what happens in hospitals. You need that sort of unlimited budget. I just want to help the people. And that's why generally when I've spoken to younger coaches, the thing that they haven't got is they haven't got the litany of players behind them that Butch has, or Pete Cowan, like I said, was teaching about 100 guys in Europe.
Right.
Because you can't argue. See, if a player in my position now, they go, well, you can't criticize Butch because all his players have done so well. Peter Costas has had a great career as a coach, as an announcer. Same thing when you've got this sort of record of success. So just like somebody turning pro to play, you can be every bit as good. There's a young player coming, Will Zalatoris, who I'm really interested to looking to see how him play, because he's in that Morikawa, Wolf and Victor Hovland era. And so just like the class of 2011, I think peer pressure is going to help him play really well.
Right.
So, the same with coaches. You're every bit as good, but if you don't have that, trophy cabinet, public perception is you aren't as good. You can't charge as much. Therefore, you're not as good a coach, but you are. So you just need the players. And I think that's so frustrating. I mentioned Joseph May. I learned a lot off him. I've learned a lot off just, yourself. All the coaches that I've rubbed shoulders with. The best part of my job over the last 17 years is I've got to, I found out actually how little I knew about golf. I knew a lot about my golf, but I knew really, and on the big scale of what I knew about golf is so small. So I developed a lot more empathy, because my way was, well, if I can't emphatically say the player was wrong because he did that, then maybe I should be a little more careful. Now, there's a lot of people in my job that go, yeah, that's what they want to do. It's my way or the highway. But it actually made me more of a student of the game, in the sense, well, there is a responsibility to the player, a fairer critique, to the coach who's actually invested a lot of time in them, and also to the viewer, because the viewer, it's like announcers, right? Announcers, I was always told in this industry, you shouldn't talk when players are hitting. That's completely blown out of the water now, because every announcer wants to, they're trying to get a resume on TV. They're not really worrying about the player. To me, that's disrespectful, right? In other words, if there's Adam Scott or Rory McIlroy or Dustin Johnson in the middle of the fairway, even if I sound like an idiot and stop, you let them hit.
It's respectful.
And explain.
Right?
Well, no, because people have tuned on to watch that player.
Right.
Not listen to us. We are secondary. We should always be secondary. But everybody wants the job now, so I'm going to say, look, hey, forget about him hitting 6-iron over water, leading by 1 with 2 holes to go. I'm going to talk and create something really impactful. Well, no, really, if you somehow you've actually got to develop the skill to work around it, and that's what the coach has to do. The coach has to work around the fact that the player might be injured, he might be getting married, divorced, kids, all of those things that nobody else takes into consideration. That's what. So my words of advice to the coach is, I know it's hard because I fail with it, is try and be a little less sensitive to the environment, the criticism, and the player's score.
Yeah.
And it's easy to say, hey, believe more in yourself, but with the amount of information at your disposal now, I'm not saying you have to bamboozle the player with go, look, see on fourth place, you're coming up here, here, and here, and all that, and I'm going to give you 50,000 numbers. Your job, sadly, is you have to decipher those and just give me, going back to my generator analogy, you just have to give me the right jet. And that's the hard thing for you guys, because if someone's going to go, is that all he told you?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And even though you could have told me 50,000 things, you've got to tell me the one thing I need. To do a Ledbetter one, I remember when I came across, and this shows how stupid players can be. And I went and saw Led, and Led was, I've known him for a while through Dennis Pugh, because Dennis worked at one of his academies. And Led was just trying to give me like an overview. So he told me about 8 things I could work on or whatever. Might have even been more. So I was playing a practice round with Nick Price, who was pretty close to #1 in the world at that stage. Might have been that particular time when he was. So he said, I heard you saw, and both from Zimbabwe, or what was Rhodesia. Right. So they're good friends. So Led had obviously told him that I'd come down there. And he goes, so what are you working on? And I go, so I rattle off about 8 things. So he goes, yeah, but what are you working on? And I go, so I rattle off the 8 things again. So he sort of shakes, said, well, which one? And I'm like, what do you mean, which one? And he goes, well, that's what I do. You know, I go there, and if he tells me 5 or 6, yeah, this feels good, that feels good, that feels good. No, I hate that. I throw him out, and then I pick the one I want. And I'm like, maybe that's why he's the best player in the world. And I think also, so for coaches, that's why it's really hard, because you guys know, and I'm not necessarily going down the Harvey Penick route where just change one thing and everything else falls into place, because I think that's way too simplistic today. Mm-hmm. But at least, you know, it is okay. And I think Butch has been good at that over the years.
Yeah,
is one thing, and that might be is a terrible thing to say, but it might be just telling a joke and just letting the guy go. I got to buy him a week. I just got to get him away. I got to get the rabbit ears off him. And I remember as a kid, my first instructor was a woman, and she gave me a book on architecture because I was reading way too much stuff on golf. Oh, so my lesson was to, if you're going to read on something else that's not going to mess with your mind about the swing. It was a great lesson. So
I think it's interesting, you know, that you look at coaches, and you know, generally they're reasonably successful late in life, because the amount of hats that you have to wear and the wisdom that you have to accrue in terms of how to deal with human beings is big. Hey, let me just compliment you, and this is I knew this before today, but I see it again as your humility and ability to know what you don't know is really important. So when we see, you know, as coaches, you know, former players, sometimes, you know everything until they start teaching, you know, for example, because, you know, we spend our time obviously looking at every single player, working out every single person's system, you know, how to communicate this and that. And then players know everything there is to know about their world, specifically for them. But they didn't realize that, you know, there's different types of, you know, people and swings and this and that. Somebody that's doing a really good job of being humble right now is Hal Sutton. He's moved into having an academy, and he's putting up some great content on Twitter, which is humble, and, you know, he had a great career, great ball striker, and he's learning, you know, about learning, really, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, it's I played a lot of golf with Hal, and you know, you start thinking of names like Jimmy Ballard, obviously, have his book up there somewhere, like everybody else. But it's once again, it's what worked. And when Hal was playing well, he was, number one, he's a good man for a start. You know, it's old school. He's like that Texas oil man. Yeah. You know, you do a deal, you know, around the campfire, cross-legged, and say, how much? Yeah, deal, done. Right. So it's like that. And I remember when Freddie Burns used to caddy for him. Freddie was on the bag when, hey, be the right club. 2001, but yeah, Hal loves the game, and it's tough. You know, what happened at the Ryder Cup that time at Oakland Hills, you know, that took a lot out of him, and it's tough. You know, I think that's the other thing about coaching and playing and life itself is you say, why do sort of coaches they're more successful later on in life? Well, number one, they get all the criticism early on, and they're told it's some wow new thing that they're working on. You know, you have to legitimize everything you're doing, just like a teenager. You know, your parents never think you're ready, and then as you get older, you make mistakes, and you have to pay for them. Yes. And sometimes pay dearly. So in that situation, I think Hal paid too high a price, because golf was deprived for a decade plus of what we're seeing now with Hal. Yeah. We've been deprived for a decade. No, I'm glad he's doing what he's doing.
He's putting out some great stuff. It's really nice to watch. Hey, so the question I'm asking everybody for our workshop and our book is, for you, what is the ultimate golf lesson? So if you had to invent the perfect lesson, what are the?
Well, there isn't one. There isn't one. No, there isn't one. The easy answer is there isn't one, because I think the golf is like life, right? It's forever changing. So in we just talk about waking up every day with, hey, I got it and all that. So what I want today in golf is different from what I wanted yesterday, and what I want tomorrow will be different than what I want today. So. And I think it is the game that you're always striving to get better. It's a weird game that you can actually technically be better and play worse.
That's right.
Most other sports, it's not the way. So I think that to answer your question, it would be what the player needs that day. But then I'm going to contradict myself, but then that's short term. And I think that's why it's so hard to be an instructor, because you can give me, it's a bit like in a pro-am, I can give someone an anti-hook. And I often used to say that, guy hits a big snap hook, or more likely a snap slice. And I'd go to the guy and I'd try and use, hey, do you ever play tennis? You ever had a topspin forehand? He goes, oh yeah, I love that shot. He said, well, next shot, give me a topspin forehand. You bit of I'm playing golf. I said, just the feel. Or bowling, like try and bowl a strike with a hook. And so I try and work with feels and that. And they go, well, hey, if that didn't work. And I said, well, the worst thing about it, I can give you something that will work today, but I know in a week that ball's going to be going 50 yards the other way. So I would say that, so if the player needs something to play tomorrow, that's a real hard situation, because then it's medicine, right?
But I think there's a difference between teaching and coaching, right? So coaching is drawing out. So I think a lot of
actually, it's a good point. I didn't think of that. No, you're right. Yeah,
they have 1,000 fields that have worked before, and teaching is, hey, let me just explain this new thing to you. And these are the steps and this and that. So I think different styles of coaches probably work better at the course or away from the course. Tournament week, not tournament week, because the kind of their ratio of coaching and teaching is and everyone's different, right? Coaches, like players, have different profiles, different skill sets.
Well,
my buddy here from Sunningdale. Do you ever play tournaments at Sunningdale?
Yeah, I used to live around the corner in Bagshot. I used to practice there. Yeah.
Rajan here is from Bagshot. So, or used to be. He's asking a good question about wine. By the way, I saw Nobilo wines on the shelf. Should I spend my money with it? Is it going to you?
No, it doesn't go to me. Actually, Gallo just bought it from Constellation. It's publicly owned for a start. It wasn't there's two Nobilo families, without trying to bore you too much. And my wife and my daughter.
All good.
Yeah, no, value for money. It's great. The Sauvignon Blanc. We actually went to Croatia last year to try and track it down. And there's an artist called Stipa Nobilo, S-T-I-P-A. Have his book there as well, actually. And we met the family, and they're the other side, basically, and that's also the side of Nobilo wine. So my dad was actually in the wine business, but it was not Nobilo wines. Yeah, but I used to do some work for them. Yeah, they've just been bought out by Gallo.
So in New Zealand, would you say Sauvignon Blanc is the best that they produce, or what's the best wine that comes out of New Zealand, do you think? Oh no, Pinot, of course.
Well, yeah, but I would say the world leaders in Sauvignon Blanc, and that was purely, there was a Labor government in the 70s that knew nothing about wine. Through a stroke of a pen said they upped the amount of fruit juice in wine, and people thought it would kill the wine industry. And they said, this is the dumbest thing, because a lot of the wine industry was started by the Slavs. That's my forebearers in the early 1900s. Well, sorry, 1930, 1940, around there. They all tried to get away from the Second World War. So the stroke of a pen, they said more fruit juice. So what that led to is the New Zealand style of Sauvignon Blancs. Stainless steel fermentation, very crisp, very fruity. But the growing conditions should lend itself to produce the best Pinots in the world. But Pinot's really intricate. They're getting better all the time. I mean, New Zealand wine is good, but I'm a big fan of Pinots. Yeah. But good Pinots are much rarer than people think, and they're exquisite. And New Zealand is getting better at them because they have the right temperate climate.
So you like a nice Burgundy then?
I don't know. I'm actually switching back to Merlot as well. Yeah, but Burgundy. It's the same group. Yeah, I mean Merlot. Obviously, if you watch Sideways, everybody jumped out. But all the best Pomerols and all that. They're Merlot, really.
That's right.
And the French hate
Merlot before you.
Exactly. Yeah. And actually, if you watch Sideways and you watch the end of it again, a good friend of mine told me, he said, because the Paul Giamatti character, he complains about Merlot through the whole thing, and right at the end, he's drinking a bottle of wine. It's Pomerol, it's a Merlot. Yeah. So there's a little twist there at the end, but yeah, whether you're a right bank or left bank person, that's debatable.
Mike Adams and I are big wine fans, and we were considering doing like an interview series. People do podcasts. It's golf and wine, right? So we'll share. We'll have the same wine as you on the table, and we'll be drinking the wine, commentating on the wine, and having some golf conversation as well. This might go a little bit longer. So
I actually we did a Paul Hobbs virtual wine tasting this year. I never thought that would be. Yeah, exactly. But I'm like, well, how's this going to work? So, you buy the one, you sit there, sat
Right.
there in front of my computer, my wife and I would
Right.
drink, cheese biscuits, drinking away. It's actually good. I'd do it again.
It's very fun, isn't it?
So it's a good idea. Yeah, golf and wine. Yeah.
That's awesome. Frank, you're unbelievably great announcer, host, and very generous for your time. I'm going to let you move along there.
You're a good friend. Your book, remember, I want the book. You said a month. You said a month.
Yeah, I think it is. We got this, like I said, we got the, the winter workshop we're doing is February, and we're hoping to be able to get out around then. So, do you know Matt Rudy?
I know the name. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's the instruction editor at Golf Digest. He's helping us, so we need to pressurize him.
Good.
And
Okay,
then,
I'll hold you to it.
I'm gonna have a lot of work to do at the end of the month to tie it all together. So, Frank, it was unbelievable. You're very curious. Stay curious, my friend.
Will do.
I'll
Likewise.
see you down the road. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, my friend. Take care. Bye.